How was beer accidentally discovered? And why does the answer make humanity look like a bunch of priorities-challenged party animals? Let's go back 10,000 years. Grug is living in the late Stone Age. Agriculture is brand new. Farming has just been invented. Most humans are still figuring out that you can put seeds in dirt and food grows. Mind-blowing stuff. Life is hard. You wake up every morning wondering if today is the day a leopard finally gets you. Your teeth hurt. Your back hurts. Everything smells like smoke and unwashed human. The concept of weekends does not exist, neither does dessert. You eat whatever you can find and you're grateful it's not eating you instead. Now here's what happened. Some forgetful human, let's call him Grug, was storing grain in a clay pot, maybe barley, maybe wheat. Archaeologists found evidence of this around 10,000 BC in the Fertile Crescent, which is modern-day Middle East. Grug puts his grain in the pot and then Grug does what Grug does best. He forgets about it. It rains. Water gets in the pot. The grain gets wet. And here's where it gets interesting. Wild yeast, which is literally just floating around in the air everywhere, lands in this wet grain slop. The yeast starts eating the sugars in the grain. It poops out alcohol and carbon dioxide. This is fermentation. Grug has accidentally made the world's first beer and he doesn't even know it yet. Days pass, maybe weeks. Grug finally remembers his grain. He walks over to his pot expecting to find food. Instead, he finds this bubbly, weird-smelling porridge situation. It's fizzing. It looks absolutely disgusting. Any sane person would throw it out, but Grug is hungry. Grug is always hungry. Starvation is a real and constant threat. You don't waste food in the Stone Age. So Grug takes a sip of the forbidden grain juice. And Grug feels amazing. Suddenly, the back pain is gone. The existential dread of being hunted by large cats has vanished. Grug feels warm and happy and confident. Grug feels like he could fight the sun. This is humanity's first hangover waiting to happen, but right now Grug is having the time of his life. Grug tells his friends try it. They also feel amazing. Word spreads. Within a generation, humans are deliberately making this stuff. We have archaeological evidence of intentional beer brewing from around 9,000 BC. That's right, beer is older than recorded history. Beer is older than the wheel. Beer is older than bread. And here's the absolutely insane part. Most archaeologists now think humans didn't start farming to make bread. They started farming to make beer. Let that sink in. The entire agricultural revolution, the thing that led to civilization, cities, writing, mathematics, everything, might have happened because Grug wanted to get drunk more reliably. Think about what this means. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans were nomadic hunter-gatherers. We wandered around following animals and looking for berries. It was hard work, but it was also kind of low stress. You didn't own anything. You didn't have a mortgage. No boss except the guy who was best at throwing spears. Then someone discovered booze and suddenly humans were willing to completely change their entire lifestyle. We stopped wandering. We built permanent settlements. We planted fields. We spent back breaking hours tending crops in the hot sun. Farming is objectively harder than hunting and gathering. Early farmers were shorter, sicker, and died younger than hunter-gatherers. We have the skeletons to prove it, but farming meant reliable grain. Reliable grain meant reliable beer, and apparently that was worth it. The Sumerians, one of the earliest civilizations, had a goddess of beer named Ninkasi. They wrote a hymn to her around 1800 BC that was actually a beer recipe disguised as a prayer. Because nothing says advanced civilization like coding your brewing instructions into your religion. The Egyptians paid pyramid workers in beer. Not gold, not money, beer. Each worker got about 4 liters a day. That's more than a gallon per day. The pyramids were built by buzzed construction workers. Suddenly, those weird angles make more sense. Ancient Egyptians also used beer as medicine. Got a cough, beer. Stomach ache, beer. Existential crisis about mortality. Believe it or not, also beer. To be fair, since beer was safer to drink than water, which was often contaminated with all sorts of intestinal nightmare fuel. This wasn't completely insane. The alcohol killed bacteria. Ancient humans accidentally invented germ theory by trying to get hammered. Beautiful. But here's where it gets even better. Different cultures discovered fermentation independently. The Chinese were brewing rice beer 9,000 years ago. Native Americans made corn beer. Africans made banana beer and millet beer. Humans on every inhabited continent looked at rotting grain slop and thought, yes, I will drink that. There's this thing called convergent evolution where different species independently evolve the same solution to a problem. Apparently humans did convergent drinking. The problem was sobriety. The solution was fermented whatever you have lying around. And it wasn't just beer. Humans fermented everything. Grapes became wine. Apples became cider. Honey became mead. Mare's milk became kumis, which is fermented horse milk. And yes, it's exactly as weird as it sounds. If it had sugar in it, someone somewhere figured out how to make it alcoholic. The Vikings loved their mead so much they believed Valhalla had a giant goat whose udders produced infinite mead instead of milk. Their version of heaven was an eternal pub with a magical alcohol goat. Priorities. Meanwhile, in ancient Babylon, they had laws about beer. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest law codes we've ever found, had regulations about beer quality and pricing. If a tavern keeper watered down the beer, the punishment was drowning. In the bad beer, they drowned you in your own inferior product. Ancient Mesopotamia did not mess around with quality control. There was also a law that if a priestess entered a tavern, she would be burned alive. Not because drinking was unholy, but because taverns were rowdy and apparently they wanted to keep the clergy classy. You could brew beer in the temple. You could drink beer in the temple. You just couldn't go to the ancient Babylonian sports bar. Religion was complicated. Now let's talk about what early beer actually tasted like, because this is where it gets gross. It wasn't clear golden lager. It was thick, chunky, room temperature. It had bits of grain floating in it. Archaeologists have recreated ancient beer recipes, and the universal review is that it tastes like alcoholic oatmeal that's gone off. The Sumerians drank it through straws to filter out the chunks. We've found ancient beer straws made of gold and lapis lazuli. Imagine being so committed to drinking grainy sludge that you craft an ornate precious metal straw for the experience. Respect. The alcohol content was low, usually around 2 to 3%. You weren't getting wasted off one cup. You had to commit. This is why Egyptian workers got a gallon a day. It wasn't enough to get them drunk, just enough to make pyramid construction tolerable. But sometimes ancient humans wanted to get actually drunk, so they made stronger stuff. The Celts and Germans figured out how to make beer up to 8 or 9% alcohol. This is around the same time they also figured out pants. Coincidence? Probably. But it's fun to imagine someone inventing trousers while hammered. Here's something wild. We can trace human migration patterns through beer. Archaeologists find ancient settlements and they dig around and they find brewing equipment. Clay pots with beer residue, drinking vessels, grain storage. Every single agricultural society brewed something. It's one of the most reliable signs that humans lived somewhere. Forget pottery styles or tool shapes. Follow the booze. There's a site in Israel called Rakefit Cave where archaeologists found evidence of beer brewing from 13,000 years ago. That's 3,000 years before agriculture. These people were still hunter-gatherers. They weren't farming yet, but they were brewing. They were gathering wild grain specifically to ferment it. The dedication is inspiring. This means humans looked at the incredibly labor-intensive process of gathering enough wild grain to make beer, which requires way more grain than just eating it, and decided it was worth it. Imagine spending an entire day collecting grain by hand, threshing it by hand, storing it, waiting for it to ferment. All this effort for ancient nasty beer that tastes like chunky sadness. But it made them feel good. And feeling good when you live in a cave and your life expectancy is 35 is apparently priceless. Now here's the thing about fermentation. It's everywhere. Rotting fruit ferments naturally. Animals eat fermented fruit and get drunk. There are videos of monkeys getting wasted on fermented palm fruit and stumbling around. Elephants will seek out fermented marula fruit specifically to catch a buzz. Humans are not the only species that discovered alcohol. We're just the only species that industrialized it. But we might be the only species that restructured our entire civilization around it. That's the real story here. Beer didn't just happen to humans. Beer changed humans. It gave us a reason to stay in one place, to build granaries, to develop pottery to store the grain, to create social gathering spaces which became the foundation of community. The earliest public buildings we've found aren't temples or palaces. They're breweries and taverns. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is 11,000 years old. It's one of the oldest monumental structures ever built. Archaeologists found massive stone circles, and you know what else they found? Huge vats for brewing, and carvings of people drinking. Humans built a temple to getting together and drinking before they built houses, before they had farming figured out. Literally, some of the first architecture was beer-related. So next time you crack open a cold one, remember you're participating in a tradition older than civilization itself. You're doing what humans have done for 10,000 years. You're drinking something that was discovered by accident, perfected through trial and error and probably a lot of food poisoning, and became so important that it shaped the entire course of human history. Grug would be proud. Grug is definitely proud. Grug invented agriculture so he wouldn't run out of beer ingredients. That's the legacy. We owe everything to a forgetful caveman and some very ambitious yeast. If you want to know more about the weird, gross, and surprisingly funny ways ancient humans actually lived, you're in the right place. Grug has many more stories. Most of them involve someone almost dying in a ridiculous way. It's a good time.